Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Pharmacy Cannabis Lecture Series. Each session is designed to deliver a small and in-depth dose of cannabis education. I'm Candace Hawes, and I want to thank all of our viewers and customers from the Pottery and from the Pharmacy Santa Ana, Santa Barbara, and Berkeley for joining us. In this session today, we're going to discuss analytical cannabis testing and what it means to consumers. Before the establishment of state regulations in California, cannabis testing was actually just an added bonus, something that was on packaging that helped sell product to consumers, but it was not required and it wasn't even consistent. Patients bought and used cannabis products with incorrect labeling, inflated potency, and products that could be contaminated with pesticides, mold, bacteria, and even traces of heavy metals. In 2015, the California Department of Cannabis Control was established. Actually, it was under a different name then, but now that's the current name. And their job was to oversee the cannabis industry and require that all cannabis and cannabis products sold at dispensaries pass mandatory compliance testing to ensure labeling accuracy and safety for consumers. Many companies also conduct their own research and development testing up to the final test to make sure that all the materials that they've used in the process will pass the final stage. And we'll talk a little bit about that more. So with that, I'm really happy to welcome our guest speaker. I'm going to give his bio after this. Kevin is the president of the Cannabis Labs. Kevin Brambat, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. We're really excited for him to join us today to talk about the tests, why they're important, and we're also going to talk about how to read a certificate of analysis. So Kevin was born here in California. He was raised in Anaheim Hills, and graduated from Canyon High School in 2010. After that, he attended the University of Washington in Seattle, where he majored in business communications and played college ice hockey. He was also a member of the Sigma Chi fraternity. In 2015, Kevin ventured into the medical device industry, and after much success, used his knowledge in that industry as a segue into the cannabis space. The state's testing requirements and technical aspects of pulling the project intrigued Kevin, who began building his lab in 2019 and who finally in June 2021 received his state license after many delays, of course, related to COVID. Kevin has since become a very active member of the cannabis community. He's a member of the Long Beach Collective Alliance, trying to start a chapter here in Orange County as well. And he's also a member of Orange County NORML. Cannabis Labs, under Kevin's direction, is introducing a new training program to educate dispensary employees and customers on testing and how to read a certificate of analysis. I'm really excited to have Kevin here with us today to discuss cannabis testing and why it matters to consumers. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kevin.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So without further ado, please get into your presentation.
Yeah, so this is mostly for like why the testing matters, not so much what the tests are, what you're testing for, how it affects you, going through the instruments and the whole process. It's really like the grand scheme of it. Why is it done in the first place? How does it affect the legal market versus the traditional market? How it affects different states? So real quick, I'll start with just some key terms. As everyone knows, this is cannabinoids, the endocannabinoid system, THC, CBD, and terpenes. I chose these because this is really the entourage effect of how it affects every person, no matter who you are, what your background is. Everyone has their own specific endocannabinoid system. Everyone interacts with THC differently, CBD, and the one I see a lot of differentials is terpenes. I think a lot of people maybe underestimate terpenes and think it's just in cannabis, but it's actually in a lot of other fruits, hops, other products. So combining terpenes with different things and different types of cannabinoids like CBD, CBN, it all just kind of works cumulatively together on each specific person. So cannabis is kind of like a trial and error sometimes with people's bodies, but the COAs are there to like guide you as a directional pull. And aside from being safety oriented and safety tested, like the amount of THC on there, the amount of terpenes on there can help you guide and get a good experience when you're purchasing your products. So real quick, I just want to go through like what the types of tests are in California. California has a very strict testing protocol compared to the rest of the country. So 66 pesticides. The reason we do that is California has a very long history with pesticides in farming and agriculture since the 1900s. Mycotoxins, they're kind of like a byproduct of when you have a lot of mold on your products and flour. Cannabinoids, your potencies, your heavy metals, lead, cadmium, mercury, arsenic, microbials, which is PCR test, solvents, so your chemical residues, your moisture, water activity, and then terpenes is optional for most brands. So real quick, I just want to start with the pesticide panel. The biggest issue we have is, you got to use pesticides to keep product clean at the same time, from aphids, bugs, bud rot, mold. Some of these older buildings are been built for almost 100 years, 50 years, and they can have some pesticides in them, and pesticides can leach onto the product in some of these places. So California, we have like the 66 pesticides, very low action limits, which I'll get to in a sec. There's a difference between inhalables and non-inhalable products. So when you were testing something, the inhaling action limits might be different than, say, an edible or a something of that nature. And one of the things we see is there's a big discrepancy between legal licensed cannabis in pesticides and some of the stuff that you wouldn't see on the shelf at a place like the pharmacy. You would see it at maybe like the shop that's in an unlicensed area where they're purchasing cannabis from illegal means. And we've done some testing and compared and contrast, and you do see some of the same pesticides hit, but the action limits and the amount of that are on there are there's a huge discrepancy. The other thing people should know is CBD and hemp right now also do have a decent amount of pesticides, but as of right now in the state of California, they aren't requiring testing, even on a federal level. So sometimes brands have gotten better, but if you do test some stuff or some of these big brands out in different parts of the country, you'll see certain pesticides hit, you'll see certain residual solvents hit. But there's this new bill called AB 45. So California is going to mandate hemp and CBD to start getting tested the same as the panel that I just showed you. So pretty soon, California is going to have some of the safest and most secure products on the shelves. It's gotten better, but it can always do more. So real quick, here is the chart. This shows so over here, you can see the action limits of inhalable cannabis and the action limits for non-inhalable. See, if you look here, you'll see it's 0.1. You'll see it's 1. You'll see the action limits. There's 0.1 for mycobutanol, very dangerous pesticide, but you'll see it's 9 for non-inhalable products. And the reason is just because when you're sourcing non-inhalables, whether it's topicals and stuff, there's different parts of the manufacturing process that get pulled into those products. And sometimes those action limits might be a little different. But sometimes also putting it on your skin versus, smoking it and creating another chemical reaction can be less than ideal. Again, these are just some more examples of the other pesticides. There's certain pesticides, as soon as you get any hits to fail, you do have some leeway. So certain COAs will see hits of pesticide. There's nothing wrong with that. It'll show as like below the action limits, but it still has something. So if it's a fail, it's in red, doesn't get processed. It has to get destroyed. So these are just good to look at. These are from the DCC regulations. If you ever want to have some nighttime reading, you can always go look at those. They're a lot of fun. But knowing the action limits is very interesting from my point of view. So some people I've talked to, like, they know that there's pesticides in their food, and they eat it anyways. You go to Vaughn's, you're going to find pesticides in the produce section. But I think people need to get reminded a bit how like negative pesticides can have on your body, especially some of the ones that are used to treat mass crops. And when you're lighting this up and turning it into smoke, it's even more detrimental to you as opposed to just eating it through your gut. So one of the biggest ones is, even if we don't realize it, it's attacking your central nervous system. people have had tingly feelings, nausea, organ damage, muscle weakness. It's neuroinflammation. I was in the medical field with medical devices, so I've kind of been around that, and I've seen how different parts of different industries have affected people, and just seeing how negative pesticides can be, or anything detrimental to your central nervous system, has long-term effects. So the biggest thing is a lot of people that smoke cannabis are people that are immune compromised or are battling some other health effects. So you can compound these if you're not smoking clean cannabis. And the biggest issue is some of the people that, you could go to a store that's selling cheaper cannabis products and save some money, but you're running the risk of these pesticides in your system.
Yep,
And that's
exactly.
kind of the biggest thing of why testing matters, is to catch clean product and consume clean product. Because if you're trying to stress out or you're not feeling too well, yeah, cannabis is a short-term relief, but you're actually sometimes doing more harm in the short run or the long run, depending on everyone's preferences. So this didn't come out too well. Can I zoom in? Let's see.
I don't think we can, but our viewers may be able to.
Okay, well, this is basically a pesticide in the middle called chlorpyrifos, and this is the pathways, or the different pathways affecting you on a genetic level. So let me see if I can. So some of the different inflammatory markers. I'm gonna try to zoom in. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to see right now, but there's different pathways in the body. So like from a genetic level to, certain inflammation, certain transponders in the body. Like this one pesticide, that little gray thing in the middle, is affecting all of that around your, this is like your genetic profile basically, or your anti-inflammatory markers. And all of that is because of this one pesticide. I wish I could show it a little bit more, but hopefully it'll show up a little bit later. But this is like a small amount can have a detrimental effect on the body.
Yeah.
Real quick, these are some common pesticides I see. Imidacloprid, which is insecticides, pyrethroids, chlorphenephr, piperonal butoxide. These are just things that we see hits of. They're not always fails, but we see them. And I thought people should know. The other one's mycobutanol. That's not listed on there. That one's very dangerous. It's also very useful for cultivators because it's good at getting rid of bugs, bud rot, and while it's effective in cleaning the product, it's very, very bad to consume.
Is it also known as Azamax? Is that the same one?
It could be. I just know it from mycobutanol.
Yeah, from the more scientific name.
Yeah. But yeah, that used to be a big problem a couple of years ago. People have gotten a lot better. It doesn't show as much, but I still do see some hits from time to time. But yeah, if you get any of that on your skin irritation is pretty common right away. I've talked to even growers that used to work at farms up north, and they used to get rashes and they never understood why. And a lot of it was because of the pesticides they were dealing with. They just didn't know. So that was an interesting one. But yeah, so again, like they're just more susceptible to contamination, like the cannabis products in the flower. And the other thing to know is sometimes you might pass on flower, but when you convert it to oil, sometimes you'll increase the concentration of that certain pesticide and you'll actually get fails. And the other problem with it in the illicit market is you don't always catch it. Mm-hmm. And you're generating heat again, you're smoking that pesticide in a more concentrated version. The other thing is during that whole manufacturing process, those pesticides get stuck to your extraction machine. You don't always get cleaned. So you might have clean flour, but then it's getting processed and tolled all over again. And you're infecting what would have been clean product, because you got to look at it from that point of view. It's like, hey, this is money we're wasting. Not wasting, but this is time we're not working, time we're not in production. It's just costing them money. And someone that's in that track of not being on the licensed market is going to cut those corners.
Yeah.
So heavy metals panel, we'll go to next. Lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium. Short-term effects, a lot of immune-compromised people can get affected right away that have issues with metals or blood toxicity. Ingesting metals is much more detrimental to the body than smoking it. It's some 20 times more harmful when it's consumed through your gut because your gut processes these metals a certain way. There's a couple more studies I'll send a link to. Lead, I do see a little bit more in poorly packaged products. So tinctures are a common one, and droppers. So some of the stuff you might see from China. I would say the biggest issue with that is, one, it's cheap, and two, it bleeds into products. So some of these tincture products, I've seen customers where they've maybe not sent them out for testing, or they waited too long, and maybe there was some heat in the room. And then once they get tested and sampled, they fail for metals, and it doesn't take much to fail. So that's, even when you have it in your house or your home, always keep it in a good location, keep it out of heat. Even bad vape manufacturers out of China, some of this stuff will bleed lead very quickly. As soon as you start heating those things up, there's always a chance. Now, we just recently did a study with this company called iSpire. We took 20 we did some vape cartridges, and they were disposables. We distributed them out with hemp, and we had, over a week span, 50 puffs at 2-3 seconds, and we found no increase in heavy metals. So we tested the distillate, it was clean, and then filled those carts up, exposed them, and basically did a before and after contrast. One second, I got my employees leaving. Okay. So whenever there's a vape crisis or something's going on, always look at the manufacturer and always look at the brand itself. Don't look at everything as a whole. Like during that vitamin E acetate, it's only one brand that's ruining it for everyone else. You don't want that. And that's what I think manufacturers like iSpire did, is we did it. We were very transparent with him, and look, this is what's going to happen. And they were on board because they trust their technology. So good manufacturers will always try ways to show how good their product is.
Agree.
Yeah. But lead is just mostly, we see it sometimes in flour, and that's usually because maybe their RO system or they're doing poorly tapped water. I typically see that in traditional flour. I haven't really seen it in any licensed flour where we've been like, why is there lead? Or arsenic is another metal we see from time to time in flour, but it's mostly from outdoor. And I believe it's because of the fires sometimes create arsenic, and then the wind blows it. And it's very hard to control Mother Nature, especially with the weather right now. So sometimes you just, unfortunately, going to see high levels of arsenic, or maybe low levels of arsenic in flour. But as far as what we see, it's really lead and arsenic. A couple mercuries. Don't think I've seen cadmium hits, but it's always good to be aware of those metals. And again, how to just avoid it: just keep your products out of heat and sunlight. Just look for your brand manufacturers. If it's made in China, then a lot of the stuff's made in China, but you can source from reputable brands. You can just tell, sometimes when you hold tinctures, you can just kind of tell. You can even scratch a little bit of it to see if the paint's coming off. There's ways. I would say the biggest issue is a lot of it ends up on the unregulated market. I've seen. So, we don't do it as much anymore, but we were testing some stuff just from the traditional stops around Orange County that have been around that were illegal, and just to compare and contrast. And you know, even with hemp and CBD, actually, it's funny. We did a little bit of a study. Someone provided us like 10 different brands. I won't say who. And we found traces of metals in their hemp and CBD tinctures that we found at like, I think it was like Walgreens and Target or something. So some of those products that have been around for a while do end up with metals.
Yeah, and until AB 45 goes into action, hemp and CBD products are considered an herbal supplement, and they're not regulated. So that's how some of these products are ending up on the shelf. They're not required to be tested. So this is good that they're all coming on board.
And the other thing is sometimes the hemp and everything will be tested. The CBD will be tested itself. They'll show that, but then they'll put it in the tinctures, but it's not tested with the tincture.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now you can put anything's third-party lab tested and doesn't mean much. Like you could say it's third-party lab tested for a foreign body test, and you can still label it that way, or not foreign eye test, or a moisture test, or something very simple, but you can just label it as such. One second. Did you have any questions?
No, not so far. This is really interesting.
Yeah. Sorry. So the other really, really, really big one that's very important that I come across a lot is the microbials and pathogens. So the ones we test for in the state of California are Aspergillus niger, Flavus, Terrace, E. coli, and Salmonella. I'd say most of what we see is failures is some sort of Aspergillus, which is otherwise known as mold. I'd say a lot of Aspergillus niger is a big one. So we did like this thing where we just got a bunch of flower strains as part of a test. We were like in San Diego, LA, and even like, where else? I think maybe the desert. We went to these unlicensed illegal shops, and pretty much they all failed for mold. Some of them were easy to see even without a test, but we went through a PCR test, 10 different strains, and they all failed. So you don't want to be smoking mold. Even in licensed cultivations, we do see hits of that, but they can remediate. So we send it back to them. They go through their own process. They fill out something with the state. They can use lights, different strategies. And then we can retest it and try to get it to pass. I'd say most of the reasons for the Aspergillus hits is contamination of the facility, humidity, temps, and poorly packaged transfer product. So sometimes if they're moving it from other facility to other facility, you look at the state of their car, their vehicle, and you'll see that's not temperature controlled. It doesn't take much for mold to start growing. And then if you've seen anything, like once a little bit of mold's there, it's, it kind of multiplies very quickly. So you need to be very careful of that. And then when you're dealing with traditional shops that are unlicensed, they're not always checking it for that. They're buying it from these cheap cultivations or these cultivations that need to be hidden from plain sight. So maybe the building isn't drawing as much power. They're not putting as much resources into maintaining plant health. They're hiding it often. There's just a lot of more reasons why certain plants or certain flower tends to have that. Same thing with illegal edibles. We see it a lot of times in edibles as well. If the nuts, if some of the other secondary ingredients aren't well kept, it will spread mold. Like the biggest thing is anything with nuts in it, especially like those chocolates or back in the day or those cookies, like almost all of them would very quickly get Aspergillus anyway. Let's see. The best thing is it can get in your product at any time. So even if you purchased it, you just got some cannabis from the pharmacy, you've got it there, you left it out, you go on vacation. If you leave it out like that, you run the risk of adding mold to it. There's a reason packaging is really good and tight and concrete. Like I recommend Mylar bags. I know pharmacy has some good old jars. Keep it very airtight. You don't want to have mold grow on your cannabis. you might not be able to see it, but it's there. And, you're spending your good hard-earned money on a lot of these products. Treat it as such. Be responsible with it. And people that are smoking it and consuming it, if you have asthma, if you have some respiratory issues, like it's gonna affect you. Like this is mold. Like if you're eating edibles and you're eating mold, like you're gonna feel like the stomach flu, the fever, and you can recover from it, but like why put yourself in that position? So one thing that happened this past summer is someone from a legal store brought in just some batches of edibles for testing. I didn't get the full story until after they just brought these in. I was like, sure, I'll test it. And I saw almost everything you could. I saw some salmonella in one of the products, very traces amount, but I saw a lot of good aspergillus. Like even when we were breaking it down, we knew it was gonna have something in it, and people were getting sick. I later found out. Never found out who or what, but it does happen out there. It's just not as reported. No one wants to say like, hey, I got sick from eating that weed brownie or something of that nature.
And things with like butters and stuff, they're going to break down faster, right, than something like a chocolate bar or gummy, correct?
Yeah, some of the stuff with fats, it can happen, but I've just always noticed anything with nuts. Like for whatever reason, anything with nuts just maybe it gets expedited or whatever, but there's just certain patterns I've seen with this. And for whatever reason, it's just always like on the illicit side of things. Like that's why like people say, hey, why am I going to a licensed store when I can go to this illegal store and save a couple $20 for $30? Like, fine, you want moldy stuff, go for it. I mean, that's why we're here as a testing lab to hold everyone accountable. And at the end of the day, that's like all we can do, because like we're on the supply chain. Like safety is our biggest concern. The state will tell you the same thing. It's not about the potency or the terpenes. It's about product that's safe at the end of the day. Would you rather have a high THC product with a bunch of mold and pesticides in it, or a lower product with THC, but it's safe and it's not going to cause you detrimental health? Everyone's different in their own way, but I think consumers really need to start paying attention to what they're consuming, because when you start generating heat with some of these chemicals, it's not good. So the other one that's pretty common, but I think most of the state on the license side has a really good grasp on, is residual solvents. Basically anything that's infused, aside from flour, gets tested for, butane, chloroform, hexheptane, you name it. Most of the licensed manufacturers, they R&D back and forth, so their limits are always good. However, in the unlicensed market, we see a lot of hits with different gases that would no way in shape or form ever pass a DCC California mandated testing license. We see it in CBD and hemp too. It's gotten a lot better, I'd say. Finding good manufacturers are important, but when these people are producing mass quantities, to have to redo a whole batch isn't the most ideal situation. So just keeping an eye on that. And that's another reason with vapes, is buying vapes in the illicit side of things. No one's holding them accountable for the amount of chemical residues, I guess, that are in their product. And it's just something that I think is a very understated part of the testing. Most people want to focus on, pesticides, cannabinoids, but I think residual solvents get left out there quite a bit. And yeah, so a moisture test, this is just pretty much used as how dry or moist the plant is. It's used in the final calculation for THC. It's a quick 5-minute test for us, at least anyways. Higher moisture, the more wet it is, a higher chance of mold and bacteria growing. So real quick, terpenes. I really wanted to touch on this because I think it's very important and very underrated in the market today when consuming products. So I know you can't see it too well, but I listed some of the bigger terpenes and some of the effects they have. This is based on published research where they've, it's anecdotal as well as studies where they've seen different connections between certain terpenes and terpene profiles, and terpenes tend to be on different strains, and those terpenes affect your endocannabinoid system. When you combine these with certain things, whether it's a mango or a cannabis, it's going to have an effect on you. So I don't know if anyone's heard of the mango effect, but if you have a lot of myrcene and you smoke some cannabis with myrcene in it and you eat a mango, it's going to get you really high. So one of the other things is the knowledge of terpenes and knowing from a reputable place what actually has terpenes in it. Because now that terpenes are big, an illicit store can start labeling, oh, this has all these terpenes, this has this terpene, but you don't know if it has it. Whereas a licensed store, it has to go through a terpenes panel test. It has to be labeled as such, and you know actually how much terpenes you're getting in there. And then one of the things we've been doing is educating the retail stores so they know how to communicate that to consumers. Because consumers might hear buzzwords like terpenes, but do they really know how it's affecting them? Do they know what terpene they're looking for? So if you're just kind of waiting around and you're feeling like, hey, I want an effect like this, an effect like this, rather than looking for the THC, find a combination where the THC and the terpenes are bridging a gap, and it helps you find like a solution to that. It's like finding a beer. It's like, you may not be able to test it, but you go sample different beers, certain beers taste a certain way. I'd say terpenes is more than just taste, it's how you feel. And I just think that's one of the benefits of these licensed stores and having testing available is what you're getting. Because at the end of the day, that's all it comes down to.
So you were saying with terpenes, they're not required to be tested, but if you're making a terpene claim, then you do have to actually test for terpenes then, right?
Yeah. Like, how is the bud tender supposed to know, like, oh, this has so-and-so's terpene? Because I know for consumers, like even me, sometimes you go into these stores, there's so much stuff there. Like, how do you decide what you want to get? And that bud tender probably can't remember what terpene everything has. It's like, oh, you wanted myrcene or you wanted pinene. Like, I just saw this, or I was looking towards this. You might want to try this. Or you say, hey, next time, if you're looking for something like this, here's this. You want to give them options. Yeah. And I think that's another thing is like why having terpenes there. Like, certain customers don't care, that's fine, but you want to give a shit for the ones that do. And I just think educating people and having them, sometimes they might not care, but the ones that do are the ones that are, looking for certain effects of cannabis. And I think we have to start somewhere. So this is the big important one as well, cannabinoids and potency. Everyone wants the highest potency. Everyone wants to get super high. This is kind of where the unlicensed and the licensed kind of meet. And I would say the state's biggest priority is health and safety, and they're doing a great job. But I think potency can be a lot better in this industry in terms of realistic numbers. So right now there's a little bit of inflation, I would say, between both industries, but I get it. And I think labs can do better. If you look on the left, you can see the different types of analytes we test. So CBC, CBD, CBDA, all the way to CBN, Delta 9, Delta 8, your total THC. So this is a COA that showcases, it's not. So over here you have your total THC. This is a customer that we tested for. He gave me permission. So when we see everything on the supply chain, we see everything. So the state needs to be able to identify the sample, the batch number, the strain, the type it is, the data was collected, the distributor, and the producer. This is really what holds us in on the supply chain. They want to see everything. And they can always trace something. If something happens, they can trace it. So here you have your THC, there's no CBD in it, and then all the other cannabinoids present total to the total cannabinoids you see right here. So I'm sorry it's a little distorted right now, but you can kind of see the action limits right here. Let's see. Yeah, so THC, again, you have a 10% differential as well. A lot of people don't know that, but if you're testing at 23%. On the label, you can technically add another good amount of percent to that if you wish. I don't really know too many people that do it, but you can. I don't know why you'd want to, but it's up to the brand. So for my purposes, I'm just there to test to get the product out there, and then whatever the brands do is up to them.
Yeah, I could say from a store standpoint, when customers come in, a lot of them's question is, what's the highest testing THC? So I can see where brands might want to do that. But then again, if a customer tries that product, they had a high THC, but it really didn't have much punch, they probably won't come back to that brand in the future. So it probably isn't a very good, wise strategy.
Yeah, I think it's getting like a little bit ridiculous. Like I've seen some, I'll show you right now, some of the, sorry, this is continuing on a COA. As you can see, there's like non-detects for certain pesticides. This is a different pesticide because we use two machines. There's a non-detect, it's all passing. Metals, let's see, residual solvents, all good, all good. Well, it's not showing up, but I had a picture of an inflated COA from another lab. This one was 41% THC, and their total cannabinoids was 47% THC. Not sure why it's not showing on this, but it's something that as labs we all talk, and it's something like in a text thread or something like, "Hey, did you see this? Did you see this?" And you just kind of have to roll your eyes sometimes. So the other thing is it's a slippery slope. Once you start passing samples with high THC, you start going through down that slippery slope where it's like, hey, this pesticide hit, can you pass that? And labs are doing it, and they've been caught, and it's good. And I wish they were more public about it, but they just cannot issue COAs at the time. And it's just unfortunate because you definitely hear about stuff, and people do lab shop and they want certain things, but you just have to kind of have your morals, I guess. I was really hoping to show this COA so customers can really see like how ridiculous it can be sometimes, and to be very careful trusting these high potency numbers. This particular lab that had it is a little notorious for this right now up north. So yeah, I'd say
what is a reasonable THC? Like what's the ceiling of what you think is actually legitimate? Like maybe like 33, 34. Like that's personally like probably the highest I've seen, and I've heard before, like years ago, we used to think it's 30, but now I see more people testing with like 32, 33,
Yeah, it's just funny how it keeps going up, right?
Yeah.
Back in the day, someone was just telling me this. He's like, man, I thought back in the day, like 21% was like the highest stuff. Like this guy was telling me, like, man, this White Widow, 21%, like all these old strains. And nowadays it's like, well, the science has gotten better. The methods have gotten better. Maybe we're finding things, which is reasonable, but the state's also working on having a standardized method. So everyone has to do the same method for their THC. So there's no discrepancy, which certain labs aren't in favor of. I personally am in favor of. I like being transparent. If everyone's doing the same thing, there's nothing left for guesswork, or there's no like this untrustfulness between labs, and because labs should be the best thing about and the most secure thing and the trust and safety for consumers. But if you can't trust labs, then like, what's the point of all this, right? Like what separates you from the licensed and unlicensed if you're going to be smoking these pesticides or smoking this mold? Yeah, the state's doing a good job, I think. I just don't think they just didn't think it was going to be this notorious, and it's just like a human experiment. You just don't know. But now they're implementing state reference labs. So they're going to go and maybe shop and see what's what and test it themselves, which I'm really looking forward to.
That'll be interesting to see when those reports come out.
Yeah, make sure you give them a discount at the pharmacy on their secret shopping. They always seem to wear hats, I've noticed. Keep an eye out. But yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, it's just there's 40 labs in the state. Certain labs have been caught. They've been in trouble. They've gotten their stuff together, but you don't know who else is doing what, and you don't know where that slippery slope is. And we're like really there to separate between the licensed and the unlicensed and illicit market. Potency doesn't affect your health, so I get that from that point of view. I've heard people say, well, it's not affecting their health as much as pesticides. Is 33% affecting them, someone more than 25, and they have a point. And I say, okay, that's where you stand on it, but the customer is still paying for something they aren't getting their money worth. Something that it'd be cool to do is, I think I've only had like 2 people actually do it, is actually see the COAs where you're purchasing your product, because I think the stores need to actually, if you request it, they have to provide a COA. Am I correct?
Oh yeah, you're correct. And you're right that not very many people ask to see it. Like, it's only been done a handful of times, but yeah, when a product arrives at the dispensary, we get the COA, we keep that on hand. We even have to store it for a couple of years. We have a whole room full of all of our COAs, and yeah, but it's not very often that people do, but more people should.
Yeah, so you can see like not only the THC, the other total cannabinoids, what those total cannabinoids are. It passed, but maybe it's got a little bit of pesticides in it. Maybe you want something more organic. Maybe it's got a little bit of metals in it. Maybe you have a tincture and it shows a little bit of metals when it got tested 6 months ago. Do you want to run the risk of it now? So those are just things to like think about when looking at COAs.
And some products will have a QR code, right? Where the customer can scan the QR code, and then right on the spot at the dispensary, you can see the COA without having to ask the dispensary representative. But then some brands don't, and then you would have to ask them for like the physical copy of the record.
Yeah, I believe you have to hold it for 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. It's just getting really like, I think consumers like demanding more integrity from the supply chain is what's needed. It's just, that's why we're doing this, is because people really don't know. They know it gets lab tested, bud tenders know it gets tested, but what does it get tested for, and why does it get tested? To keep people safe, because now that you've seen the detrimental effects of it, you're gonna maybe think twice between going to that trap shop down the street in LA, and where it might have switched hands a couple times, back of someone's truck, molds growing in there.
Yeah. And especially if you see California product in another state, a product that's labeled California, and you're buying in another state, that might be a red flag as well to why isn't this product being sold in California?
Yeah. Well, I will say there is a demand for California product in elsewhere in the country. Just people want it. Also, the quality is still much better. Like, I can tell you, like, I've seen pictures and I've talked to other labs, Oklahoma. Man, the stuff they see on a daily basis is just you want to see mold. Yeah, you want to see mold, go there.
The bar is pretty low in Oklahoma. They pretty much give anybody with a heartbeat a license there. So, there's a lot of players in there that don't have the experience and aren't, practicing good practices.
I mean, I've seen labs pass stuff with like actual mold on it. I'm like, what the heck? Like, once you homogenize it and you look under a microscope, you can see it. And I've just seen stuff from that area. There's also other environmental factors, like something in the Midwest might have to use a certain pesticide than the other states, or they might have more effects to it. But California just seems to be the best place to grow. Everyone wants it. And yeah, the other reason to be careful is, so when you destroy all these products, if they fail, you got to destroy it on camera and record it. And not all of it gets destroyed on camera. Sometimes it gets diverted into the illicit market in other states. And guess who's buying it is customers from that trap shop, because you're not re-entering this back into the system through metric.
Yeah, and this blew my mind when I learned about it. And you said that, yeah, they've figured out like crafty ways to make this happen and divert it, the stuff that's supposed to be destroyed, and still find a way to make money on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, go and you just hear all these other even customers just say, hey, like, just certain people say like, hey, I can just buy hemp for $100, take it, swap it out, and then destroy
Mhm.
the hemp and then just divert it. Like things, people are crafty.
Yeah,
So
unfortunately.
yeah, so it's just something I've seen. So again, if people, I mean, you don't want to destroy $100,000 of product. You know, that's hard to stomach for a lot of people. It's like some people take risks, and I think the state's done a really good job of enforcing it. I will say they're getting better at audits. It was tough with COVID, but the DCC is always checking people's pesticides log. People don't know this, but cultivators have to keep a very detailed record of pesticide logs. They have to get tested for pesticides, so they themselves are held to a high standard. These cultivators are not just growing and whatever passes. They have logs, they have audits, they have to take tests, they have to be on top of their stuff. So it's good that the state's there because they want to help you at the end of the day. Like they're not there to go and grab you and make your life miserable, contrary to what people think and sometimes I think. But they really are there to help you, and I've had a great relationship with them. Like I've had my frustrations, but when you go and sit and talk to them and you hear their side, they're just people that are trying to do a good job and they really care about health and safety. So a lot of credit to them, because that's their ultimate concern. If they have to say if there's 40 labs right now and say 30 are being nefarious, they're going to shut them down. And if 10 labs are holding up the supply chain, that's okay with them because that's what they care about is health and safety. So, again, when you're buying at a licensed store, your chances of getting clean product that's safe is really good. As far as potency, I can roll the dice on that, admittedly.
Plus or minus 10%, right?
Yeah. So, um, at the end of the day, we just want to keep consumers safe. The regulations are for the consumers, and just be careful and be thankful. Like California has really strict testing. Some of these other states, like I think they're really lenient. Like some people say California is too strict. They are, but I see why now. Like after being in running a lab and like seeing what comes through the door, you realize where they're coming from.
Yeah, we do have a history of using pesticides, in agriculture, and it can get widespread and travel through the wind. Like you said, we can't control nature, so it's good that they're looking out for us. And we used to have some products back before they implemented these stricter testing levels, and they actually launched them like little by little. Like they didn't like just implement these strict results. They rolled it out like in different
Yeah.
stages. So as they rolled out these different stages, we started losing some of the products. Like we used to have potato chips. I really haven't seen that many companies come back out with potato chips because of the source. If the
Yeah.
source, like the nuts, the blueberries, the strawberries, if they're grown in California, they alone could have too much pesticide in them to be used for a cannabis product. And a lot of people don't know this, that we have so much pesticides in our foods, and even food that is considered organic in the grocery stores is still allowed to have more pesticide than that's allowed in the cannabis edibles. So if you want to
Yep.
eat completely organic, eat all of your food from a dispensary because that's where you're going to get the lowest amount of pesticides.
It's crazy, like finding that out because I've had people try to do some organic products. There was someone I know that was making something out of beeswax of all things, and it was supposed to be a good topical, great product, but it failed for kufnos, which is a pesticide used for honey and bees. So in that market of things, maybe the pesticide was okay, but once you bring in cannabis, that's
Not
lower. And
anymore.
this is just something that's a topical. You're not even ingesting it or anything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Very,
it's
very interesting.
yeah. So cannabis is pretty clean because sometimes for fun, I'll just sometimes go grab some stuff in the grocery store and test it just to see what happens. And I've changed my diet a couple times.
You're like, wow. Yeah. All the times though, they like pull microgreens and all that kind of stuff off the market, or, spinach and stuff like that. They find problems all the time. Do you have a couple minutes for questions?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, perfect. So what do you think is the most sketchy kind of product out of like edibles, vapes, concentrates, flour to buy from an illegal dispensary? Like if you were to like at least not buy one thing and to buy that from a regulated market, what would you say avoid that one thing?
Ooh, that's a good one. It's a tough one, but a good one.
I would probably I would say vapes, like if I was telling somebody, because a lot of people you can actually go to the head shops or the glass market in like LA and you can buy major brands packaging and people can make vapes that look
Yeah,
like they're stizzy, but they're not stizzy, So that would, in my opinion, I think would be vapes. Even if it looks like it's from a brand that's notable, and usually is tested. If you buy it at an illegal dispensary, an unlicensed one, there's a good chance that they just bought that packaging somewhere on the black market and, are putting their own product inside.
that's a tough one because it also depends on the person. Like having edibles, like the edible thing where people are getting sick, like that kind of
Yeah,
blew my mind.
that's
Flour
true.
and smoking molds, another thing, or the pesticides. That's a tough one.
So
Um,
don't buy anything then from a
yeah, don't buy
buy it
anything.
all licensed. There's a reason why all of those categories you wouldn't want to buy something that's not tested. And like really, like when you compare it, the prices aren't that much different. I mean, there's a lot of flour in the regulated market. You can get like $25 an eighth. Like that, you're probably going to find similar prices in an illegal dispensary. So why not buy it from a reputable place where that it's been tested? Same thing with CBD products that are like the health food stores and stuff like that. You can find them for like over $100. You can find a lot of tested medical sublinguals for like $45. So why pay
Yeah.
more and you don't even know if what's on that package is what's really inside that bottle.
Yeah, I think also some people have just been doing things a certain way and like used to these
Mhm.
shops or
Yeah,
um
that's
but
true.
I think once they realize it and what's actually in there, because I've had people say like, "Oh, I don't care if it's got all this stuff," but they don't realize like, "Oh, it's tested." Like, it's tested for a reason. It's not tested to like be cool or like, "Oh, we're tested in that sort of sense." That's what some people I've talked to like think of testing as.
I have one question that came into from the audience. Someone's saying, why do you think states like Illinois that have testing requirements, even though they have testing requirements, recently the state was aware of contaminated pre-rolls, but yet they let the products go onto the market? So do you have any insight in why maybe the state let these products that didn't pass go to the customers?
I would need to see the reasoning behind it, like what was the exact contaminant.
Yeah.
It's very expensive to do a recall. I don't know if any of you guys have seen, but in Michigan, there's lab was doing the nefarious stuff that I was talking about, and they had to take out $250 million worth of product off the shelves, and it like disrupted the supply chain for the retail stores. The state's losing money. The retailers are losing money. Everyone's losing money, and it was a nightmare. And I
It
think it
could
was
also go ahead. Sorry.
I think it was a mold issue, but I know that they'd been in trouble before. Um, it could have been just there could be a lot of reasons. I'm surprised because I know a state like California would pull that very quickly. And in the early days, there was a lab that happened to.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to look more into that because that's kind of alarming. So thanks for sharing with me, Nikki. But yeah, I know like in California, like I said, when they first were rolling out the testing requirements, something might have shown, but yet it wasn't, unpassable until a certain date. So in that circumstance, like yeah, the state knows it's in there, but it's not allowed until like say January 1st, 2022 or something like that, which is kind of concerning. And that's why it's important to look at your own COAs, right? To look at the products and to make sure that even if the state's allowing it, is that something that you want in your own body?
Yeah.
I've also heard like people say like, oh, when I smoke a bowl and it has pesticides in it, it has like white ash, where it makes me cough. From like your experience and talking to people, have you found that there's like ways you can tell that a product like cannabis flower
The
is
cough.
contaminated when you're consuming it?
The cough for
Okay.
sure, or like the sort of like breathing or the headaches. Like I've had that happen a couple times where people just get headaches.
Hmm.
Um, Vapes for sure. Like people would be like, I just can't do vapes. I get headaches. That was a big one. Um, I haven't heard about the way the flower, like the ash or anything, but I have heard it just you can just tell. There's something that's like people have smoked a long time that anecdotally can just tell.
Yeah.
Or like their bong, if they're smoking out of a bong, there's a weird filter to it, or there's some sort of discoloration that they can see.
Yeah.
Um, that I've heard.
Yeah, me too. So I was just wondering if you had read any research on anything like that. Um, and then I also just wanted to say too, in case people don't know, this is probably like the last question. What is the process? So if you can just like in a short, one, two, three, like a product is
Oh,
grown at the cultivation and then
so it gets cultivated. Everything we sample, other for compliance, has to go through a distributor. So before a cultivator or manufacturer can sell it, it has to go through a pass through the distributor. It can be on the same site. So
Mhm.
they call us like, "Hey, Excelbis Labs, we need a driver because we need to physically go there, sample it with them present, and we need to randomly pick it."
Mhm.
So there's a camera there. We put on we have a whiteboard. We say this is the batch number. You write it out. This is how much we're picking. So there's a list of like a distributor guide. So we're supposed to pick 0.00035 of a total amount. So say if it's 50 pounds, we have to sample, I forgot what the amount is, like 24 grams or something like that. Even though we only need 10 grams to test, and then we have to just sample it in a huge big box. We just grab random spots. Well, we have a process that we do, so it's like fair. You get a good thing that's representative of the whole batch. Same
Mhm.
thing with finished products. If it's pre-rolls and there's 6 boxes, we're pulling pre-roll packets out of that different boxes randomly, and that gives you that kind of homogeneous feel and look to it that you want in a COA. You don't want to just pick, oh, this looks like a good nug, I'm going to grab this. You want to get something because when we bring it here, we homogenize. We take all that, we break it down, and we have like a whole big bag of it. Like we'll take pre rolls and just smash them up, and there's a bag of pre rolls. And when we test it, we're testing it with the paper in it and everything in it. That's the way it needs to be done.
And then also the product is like quarantined, right? Until like the test results come back. So that product is not allowed to go anywhere. And then once you
Yes.
get the test results back and you give them a clear, and the test results when you're doing a compliance test are automatically sent to the state, right? So like it's like an automatic kind of
Yeah.
process. And then
Yeah.
that product is cleared, it can be picked up and then it can be transferred to a dispensary, right?
Yeah. So as soon as everything's okay, they can start stickering it. They can send it to whichever store, pharmacy, wherever they want to send it to, and it can be sold. And then we keep it for 45 days. We actually keep it for a little bit longer just in case something ever pops. And, um, if it needs to get destroyed after that, we destroy it, but we keep the data, the COAs, everything that pertains to that sample with us.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was really educational, and you've been so great and so informative. Do you have any contact information or a website that you'd want to share with the audience?
Um, yeah, just go on our Instagram. You can just send me a message if you have any questions. Our website's excelbislabs.com. We're in Santa Ana, California. If anyone wants a tour, they're more than welcome to. I know you've been there a couple
Yeah,
times.
it's a great lab.
So if you want to just take a look and go more in depth, see how the process is, I don't know, it's more of a nerdy thing. It's not the funnest part of the industry, but it's pretty cool to see how like samples are broken down and how it's analyzed. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, just let me know.
Yeah. And then you're going to have a training program and you're going to be having handouts, educational handouts. So I'm sure people can check in on your website if they work for other dispensaries, if they want to get trained.
Yeah.
Please check out.
So what we want to do is like bring education to the like this. I want to teach the bud tenders, the people that are actually in front of customers, like why is it tested? It's tested because you run the risk of this and this, and look at the terpenes, look at all these other factors. So I think if the bud tenders know and they're trained on it, they don't need to know what machine does what or what it is. They just need to know a very basic understanding and why it's tested, and it's tested for their safety. And I
Well,
think
that's why you're
the more
great.
people, even the other cities, like I've had people from other cities come in and like they don't understand like why it should be licensed. And I think we take it for granted why it's licensed, but we don't realize like, hey, we have all these trap shops in Anaheim, or that's a city that's not licensed. It's like, hey, if you put some licensed stores in there, um, you know, you can get at least clean product to those people. Because if people want weed, they're going to find it.
Yeah, and if a city doesn't have licensed dispensaries, people are going to get it somewhere. Some don't want to travel; they don't want to get a delivery service, and so the cities aren't doing themselves a service, and they need to provide their customers clean, licensed product. So
Yeah, and delivery prices have gone up even with the license side, I believe, because of gas. So
yeah,
it's all a cause and effect.
yeah, and it takes people like you educating people and opening your doors to help change their minds. So, thank you so much for being with us
Of
today.
course.
Yeah. And thanks to all of our guests for being with us for this edition of the Pharmacy Cannabis Lecture Series. I also want to thank your team at Excellibus Labs for making this possible. I hope that we were able to share some information with all of you that will help you become better informed cannabis consumers, and that the information that we provide will help you find relief. Until next time, stay safe and well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.